Look at this place. Quiet, peaceful. But in 1942, this fjord was the lair of a monster. Hiding here, surrounded by anti-submarine nets, smoke generators, and anti-aircraft guns, sat the largest battleship ever built by a European navy, the Tirpitz. She was the sister of the infamous Bismarck, but she was 2,000 tons heavier, better armored, and smarter. Winston Churchill called her the Beast. For nearly 3 years, the Tirpitz barely fired her main guns in anger. She barely left port, yet she was the most dangerous weapon in the German arsenal. Why? Because of the fleet in being concept. Just by existing, she tied up the British Royal Navy. As long as the Tirpitz was floating, the British had to keep their biggest battleships and carriers in the North Sea, waiting for her to come out. She was a chess piece that paralyzed the entire board. The British tried everything to kill her. They sent 34 heavy bombers in 1942. Result? 0 hits. They sent Chariot, human torpedoes. Failed. They sent X-craft midget submarines to attach mines to her hull. They damaged her, but she didn't sink. They sent carrier-based bombers in Operation Tungsten. They killed 100 men and scarred her deck, but the bombs just bounced off her 12-inch armored belt. Conventional weapons were useless. To kill a beast this big, you didn't need a bigger gun. You needed a change in the laws of physics. Enter Barnes Wallis. He wasn't a soldier. He was an engineer at Vickers Armstrong's. He was the man who invented the bouncing bomb used by the Dambusters to flood the Ruhr Valley. But Wallis had another idea. An obsession, really. He believed that trying to hit a ship directly was a waste of time. Even if you hit it, the armor would deflect the blast. The energy would dissipate into the air. Wallis proposed the earthquake effect. His theory was simple but revolutionary. Don't hit the ship. Hit the ground underneath the ship. If you could drive a massive explosive deep into the earth or seabed near the target, the shock wave would travel through the soil, which transmits energy better than air. It would act like a localized earthquake. It would shake the ship's keel until it snapped, or it would liquefy the seabed, creating a vacuum that the ship would simply fall into. The Air Ministry laughed at him. Wallis, they said, to do that you'd need a bomb weighing at least 5 tons. No plane in the world can carry that. Wallis replied, then build a better plane. For years, they ignored him. But as the Tirpitz refused to die, desperation set in. In 1944, they finally gave Wallis the green light. The weapon he created was a monster. Official name, the 12,000-pound medium-capacity bomb. Code name, Tallboy. It wasn't just a barrel of explosives. It was a precision instrument. Most bombs in World War II were roughly made iron casings. They tumbled when they fell. They were inaccurate. The Tallboy was machined by hand to perfect aerodynamic shape. Look at the fins. They are offset by 5 degrees. Why? To make the bomb spin, like a rifle bullet. Spinning stabilized the bomb, allowing it to fall perfectly straight from 18,000 feet. By the time it hit the ground, it would be traveling at 750 miles per hour, faster than the speed of sound. The casing was made of high-tensile steel, thicker than the armor of a tank, so it could survive impacting concrete or rock without shattering. It was a bunker buster before the term existed. But who could carry it? Only one plane, the Avro Lancaster. And even the mighty Lancaster had to be stripped down. They removed the armor plating, the mid-upper gun turrets, and even the pilot's seat armor to save weight. And who would fly them? Only one squadron, the 617, the Dambusters. the elite snipers of the RAF. In late 1944, the hunters were ready. October 1944, the Germans made a fatal mistake. They moved the Tirpitz south to the island of Tromsø. They thought she would be safer there, acting as a floating battery to stop an Allied invasion. But by moving her south, they brought her just within range of the Lancasters flying from Scotland. November 12, 1944, 3 a.m. Operation Catechism is a go. 30 Lancasters take off from Scotland. The weather forecast is risky. In Norway, the fjords are usually covered in thick fog. The Germans relied on this fog and their artificial smoke generators to hide the ship. If the pilots couldn't see the target, the Tallboys were useless. You can't precision bomb a shadow. But as the Lancasters approached the Norwegian coast, a miracle happened. The sky was clear. For the first time in months, there was no wind. The smoke generators on the ground hadn't started yet. And there she was, sitting in the calm blue water, the Lonely Queen. At 14,000 feet, the bomb bay doors opened. Squadron leader Tate lined up his sights. Inside the plane, the bombardier pressed the button. The 12,000-pound steel shark detached from the plane. It began its 30-second free fall. As it fell, the fins caught the air. It began to spin. The sound changed from a whistle to a terrifying supersonic scream. 9:41 a.m. The first bombs landed. Some hit the ship directly, but Barnes Wallis was right. The ones that missed were the ones that killed her. Several Tallboys slammed into the mud and sand alongside the hull. They buried themselves deep into the fjord floor before the delayed fuses triggered. This is the earthquake effect. The massive shock waves liquefied the seabed. The solid ground turned into quicksand. A massive crater opened up underneath the starboard side of the ship. The Tirpitz didn't just take damage, she lost the very ground she was floating on. The water displaced by the explosion shot up in massive geysers, washing over the decks. Then came the direct hits. 2 Tallboys struck the ship. Unlike previous bombs that bounced off, these were traveling at supersonic speeds. They punched through the armored deck, through the mess halls, through the engine rooms, and exploded deep inside the bowels of the beast. A hole the size of a house was blown out of the port side. The Unsinkable ship was now mortally wounded. The list began immediately. 15 degrees to port, then 30 degrees. The captain gave the order, "Abandon ship, counterflood," but it was too late. The craters in the seabed were pulling her down. The 50,000-ton mountain of steel began to roll. As the angle passed 60 degrees, gravity took over. The main gun turrets, each weighing 1,000 tons, were held in place only by their own weight. There were no bolts strong enough to hold them. As the ship rolled, the turrets slipped out and plunged into the fjord. Within 11 minutes of the first bomb, it was over. The Tirpitz rolled completely upside down. She hit the shallow bottom of the fjord. Her superstructure was crushed into the mud. Above the water, only her red, rusty keel remained visible, like the belly of a dead whale. Silence returned to the fjord, but inside the hull, the horror was just beginning. 1,700 men were on board. Hundreds escaped by swimming. Hundreds died in the explosions. But nearly 1,000 men were trapped alive inside the overturned hull. They were in air pockets, compartments that hadn't flooded yet, but they were upside down, in total darkness, with the water rising and the oxygen running out. The rescuers on the outside heard them. They were tapping Morse code. SOS, names, last messages. German engineers rushed to the scene with cutting torches. They tried to cut holes in the hull to drag men out.
But the hull was thick armor plate. It took hours to cut a hole large enough for a man. It was a race against physics. Cutting the hull released the pressurized air inside the pockets. As the air hissed out, the water level inside rose instantly, drowning the very men they were trying to save. They managed to save 82 men this way, but for the rest, time ran out. The rescuers later reported a haunting detail. As the oxygen dwindled, the tapping stopped. Instead, from deep inside the belly of the ship, they heard singing. The trapped sailors, realizing no one was coming, joined hands in the darkness. They sang Deutschland, Deutschland über alles. The voices grew fainter and fainter until the water took them. By the morning of November 13th, the ship was silent.
The destruction of the Tirpitz was the final nail in the coffin of the German surface navy. Barnes Wallis proved his theory. The Tallboy became a legend of engineering. After the war, a Norwegian salvage company bought the wreck. It took them nearly 10 years to cut her apart. Most of the steel was sold. Some of it was used to make manhole covers in Oslo. Some of the armor plating is still used today as temporary road surfaces for roadworks in Norway. Today, if you visit the fjord near Tromsø, you can still see the craters on the seabed where the Tallboys landed. Memorial plaques stand on the shore. The lonely queen of the North is gone. But her story remains a testament to two things: the genius of the engineers who built the bomb to kill her, and the tragedy of the men who died singing in her iron belly. This was the story of the biggest game of cat and mouse in naval history. If you enjoyed this deep dive into WW2 engineering, make sure to subscribe and check out our video on the Yamato for another story of a giant falling. Thanks for watching.